Welcome to this next interview. It is a special one because we have two expert guests sharing their insights on how to thrive in the new normal, what leaders should know to confidently lead innovation in hybrid and remote teams and organizations. Everything in higher ed needs to have long titles like that. We are having a series that we're launching in fall 2022 on that theme. We have over a dozen speakers. If you haven't signed up to get all these interviews and all the bonuses and resources into your inbox, please do so. You will also get an invite to the Facebook group. And we have already approaching 150 people in the Facebook group. Over 300 people have registered for the speaker series. We expect those numbers to grow. And there's been really great themes that I know will be re-emphasized in this interview. Without further ado, I want to introduce Debbie Irwin and Jairemy Drooger and let them each briefly introduce themselves before we get into the content of the interview. Debbie?
Thanks, Kai. So looking forward to this conversation, but I'm Debbie Irwin. I'm the Executive Director of Shenandoah Community Capital Fund, which used to be Stanton Creative Community Fund. And we're an entrepreneur support organization. So we really love innovating and helping entrepreneurs figure out how to start, sustain, and grow businesses.
Great. Jairemy?
I'm Jairemy Drooger, and I'm with MSL Consulting, and we help organizations that are growing and scaling focus on purpose, people, and strategy, and get those things aligned. And we do that typically in a fractional capacity.
That's great. And fractional, that might be jargon for some people. Do you want to explain that?
Sure. So we have a team of folks that can fill fractional roles, like a few hours a week as like a CFO for an organization, or a chief marketing officer, or a chief strategy officer, or even a COO, depending on what the need of the organization is. So we do that not by coming in and consulting, but kind of by coming in and rolling up our sleeves and being part of the team in one of those roles.
That's great. So that probably foreshadows some things that we'll be talking about moving forward. But to frame this for the listeners and watchers, the reason I'm really excited is because people do associate innovation with entrepreneurship. And there has been no organization in the last, 5-8 years. How long have you been around, Debbie?
14, but in our current capacity, like this, for about 5.
Okay. So, just myself being in the community, it seems like there's just been this rapid rise and ascent in your particular organization due to your leadership, your approach, the team around you, the entrepreneurial spirit that is here in the Shenandoah Valley, all of those things combine. And it just seems to be a perfect storm for you to really be facilitating entrepreneurship on a regional scale. We're talking, we're in the western part of Virginia. This is a huge expanse geographically. We've got lots of little mini cultures, and Harrisonburg's different than Stanton, different than Luray, different than, Lexington, all of those things. And here you are succeeding as an organization, getting huge grants, supporting small business owners, and doing it with a smile on your face and energy to spare, it seems like, from the outside. But you're also going through a lot of organizational growing pains as you experience that success. And you are, just like everyone else, adjusting in this peak post-COVID world, but you're also helping other people adjust their business plans, their organizational strategies. How do entrepreneurs rethink what their service or product or delivery model was now that all of a sudden, for a while, you couldn't be in person in the same room together? So I just feel like you, particularly Debbie, have so much insight into our theme that we're going to try and get all the value we can out of this interview, and then hopefully share some resources for people if they're interested in connecting with you or Jair more directly afterwards, they can do so. So that being said, how in your words would you talk about SCCF today?
Oh, yeah. So SCCF today is totally different than when we first started in 2008, which is a good thing. If organizations aren't innovating alongside the entrepreneurs that we serve, we have no business being an entrepreneur support organization. And so SCCF in its current form was because of taking the advice of some really important mentors when I first became executive director at the end of 2018, beginning of 2019. And so we were a very small nonprofit back then, and everyone had left the organization except me. And so they're like, hey, guess what? You're interim executive director now. And I was like, I am 25 and doing what? We were in a pretty bad spot financially. And so we had some work to do to get sustainable again. And so I was introduced to this world of innovation and entrepreneurial ecosystem building. And so I met with the Startup Champions Network and Larkin Garvey, and I started taking in all things. What does it mean to support entrepreneurs more holistically? What does it mean to take a wider lens when we think about people and what they're trying to accomplish and the goals that they've set out for themselves? And so we got together with 17 other organizations in the Shenandoah Valley, and we just started having conversations. They were hard, they were good, they were thoughtful. We started learning what people really own versus what they have access to. And so we really leaned into this convener role. How do we get people talking to each other more? How do we start thinking bigger ideas? So we got this $1.2 million grant from Go Virginia. That got me from a staff of me to a staff of 4. And I was like, big deal, all right, this is awesome. But then I went out on maternity leave 2 weeks after hiring those individuals. So we didn't have time to put any like system or processy into place. We were just like, okay, you're here, do the job. And they're like, what job? So there's a big learning lesson, number 1. And then the following year, we worked with the Center on Rural Innovation, who is one of the leaders in rural development and rural innovation and entrepreneurship. Huge, important resource for us. And we won a $1.5 million grant from the U.S.E.D.A. That was called Build to Scale. 1 month after that, we were awarded another $1 million grant from the SBA for a program called Community Navigator. And that was particularly for supporting underrepresented founders. So we funded 5 grassroots organizations that we saw the tenacity of those organizations, very similar to what SCCF had been going through in those early days, to say they've got potential, we need to fund them. So we started turning into this funding funnel as well, because these collaborations created this deeper impact. And so we got all this money and it was awesome. Then it was like, oh crap, we have to implement on this now. So it grew from a staff of 4 to 14, and that number is now shifted to we're now at 12, because we found out what redundancies were in place and some people just didn't fit, like you often find within organizations. And so I went from being a pretty much like more of like a peer with these 3 other people, and it was the 4 of us making this thing happen. Yeah, I had the title, but I wasn't really a leader yet. It was kind of trying to figure it all out, to I have a huge staff to manage now, and I have to figure out how to effectively do that. And I don't know the approach to that at all. And so it's like, I got to get outside help. I've got to get more mentors on this. I've got to figure out what I'm doing, because I don't know what I'm doing right now. And so being able to say over the past 5 years very consistently, I'm not sure how to do that. Who do I need to talk to? Has been one of the biggest learning experiences for me. That listening first approach has really helped us grow. So we're in this crazy spot right now. We are almost a year into onboarding all of those staff now. We've seen even more success with the programs that we're running. We've found a lot of growing pains, found a lot of pain points, and are really starting to see what it means to run growth-oriented organizations. So when we do work with growth-oriented organizations, we're now getting to feel exactly what they're feeling. Especially me. I get to sit down with entrepreneurs now, and they're talking about how they just don't know how to manage this one staff person, or they have these 3 decisions in front of them and they don't know how to prioritize them. And it's like, oh yeah, I had that conversation last week. Oh my gosh, I'm right there with you. And just all of these pain points that you feel when managing a growing team. And so we're at a really exciting spot. we're in a really momentous spot. If we can really solidify a lot of these things that we've put in place, there will be deeper impact for entrepreneurs across the region. So I think this is a really great time to keep asking for advice and help as we grow.
Well, if anyone was wondering why Debbie is on this speaker series, I think you just understand why. And what I want to point out is, and we have other speakers that didn't experience your rapid growth, but echo this thing I want to point out, which is, from the outside observer, you know exactly what you're doing. You're getting $1 million grants, you're growing. I mean, that's the success story. That means the leader is doing what the leader does, and the leadership team is doing what they're supposed to do to grow the organization. And I mean, what's the problem here? And then at the same time, you're saying, wait a second, my leadership needs to innovate. I need to innovate my own personal capacity as a leader, and the leadership that I'm facilitating as a process on a leadership team and on behalf of an organization. The added complexity here is, in my mind, the support of helping other organizations do that at the same time. So I'm really appreciative of that, because I feel like you're helping an entire region develop and mature in this way. Because I didn't know about the Center on Rural Innovation. I'd be really curious, what are the themes that they find that are particularly relevant to our type of geography and spread out nature and those sorts of things. But you then called Jair, or how did that connection happen?
That actually came through the board. So I sat down and talked to the board, and it was weird going through that relationship with them for a while of, we're growing this organization and I'm constantly pushing and I'm constantly saying, we're writing a big new grant, we're writing a big new grant, we're doing this thing. And then, hey, we got all the big grants that I wrote. And I think we all had a panic attack moment of like, oh my gosh, this is a totally new organization. What the heck do we do as a whole? And so the board and I sat down, they're like, we want you to develop more as a leader. What are ways that we can help? And Jair and I connected quite a few times because he's helping on our S2B, our accelerator program. And so he talked to my board chair, Juan Pablo. And I was like, guys, instead of putting me through a certification course or something like that that's online, Juan Pablo brought this proposal of like, what if we put Jair in the organization, not just to develop Debbie as a leader, but also the entire leadership team that needs support? What about the entire organization that's going to need to put this infrastructure into place in order to be able to create the most effective teams and be able to implement on everything we promised? And we're not always going to get it right, but we do need to make a much better concerted effort than what I know how to lead right now. So entered Jair, and it has been organizationally changing, life-changing for us to go from last December till now. We would not be in this spot right now if we didn't have this outside support saying, hey, flag, this is what you need to look at. Hey, what if we looked at this thing over here? But first, the board and I both had to be willing to say, Debbie, you need to develop. Like there's some warning signs here. We really need to get you some leadership help. And so being able to first drop that ego and say, you know what, you're right, I really do need this help right now, was the first step in being able to work with Jair and his team.
That's fundamental to leader development, and it's not easy. So I mean, thank you for doing that. And then Jair, what would you say by way of introduction, and again, I think highlighting what your approach is?
Yeah. So, I mean, listening to Debbie share her story, which of course I know, is it just kind of, it makes me smile, one, because of, her ability to see that, step back and do it. But two, it kind of makes me think a bit. And I know Debbie and I have talked on this, my own journey, right? We talk about this a lot. The way I got to start doing what I'm doing is I've been through this path. I've grown and scaled businesses, right? Some that I was part of, and some that I founded. And so I've been down this path a few times on my own and with others and also with clients. And it's an interesting journey, right? And one of the great things about being successful, as in Debbie's case, the organization being successful, or maybe it's not great, but I think it is that all of a sudden you just, you succeeded, and you succeeded in putting yourself in a position where you don't know what to do next, right? You're now leading something you've never led before, either a bigger organization, a more complex organization. And so that's fascinating, right? I think to be in it, it can be terrifying. It can be exhilarating. It can be a lot of things. But to me, I felt similar to Debbie mentioning some of her mentors. I was really lucky in my journey, in my own entrepreneurial journey and work and career journey, to have worked for some amazing organizations. And then as I was then doing my own thing, be surrounded by some really amazing people that shared with me these things that to me seemed like magic, to them seemed like this is just a standard, right? And I was amazed by what a difference that could make if I took those things and applied them to my own organization.
Can you give an example of just one or two to make that concrete?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, even something as simple as like, how are you going to run a meeting, right? How are you going to run a meeting? Super basic. Everyone that works in a business is part of meetings, right? How are you going to set your goals, for the quarter? How are you going to prioritize for the week, right?
Okay, this is good. And this is what I want to juxtapose here and focus on a little bit is Debbie's out here writing $1 million grants that can fund 12 new people in an organization. And the board decides with Debbie that we're going to invest in leader development. And now you're talking about how to run a meeting and like what flow charts and a racy chart, who's responsible, accountable, consulted, informed about items. I mean, really? That seems like such a disconnect between sort of visionary, transformative leader responsibilities and now what you bring in as this expert consultant is like, let's look at your meeting agendas.
Yeah, it's and just to be clear, we don't spend the whole engagement working on meeting agendas, but those things are so foundational to driving change and innovation. And without them, in my opinion, it's not really possible to do it well. And so while those things can seem rather mundane, and to be clear, that's not the only thing we do as we engage is those things. But without that sort of base foundation, it's very hard to lead and then drive innovation, right? And so when you can implement certain best practices, it almost shortcuts some things, right? And things that maybe are frustrating or difficult, they start to fall a little bit more into a system, makes it easy to, as an organization evolves and gets more complex, wrap your head around it, understand it, and it makes it easier for everyone up and down the line to be able to communicate and really be on the same page. Because at the end of the day, when you go from a staff of 4 to 14, over a couple months, and you have that kind of explosive growth, when you grow slowly, people learn from those around them, right? You have a supervisor that's been there, that understands the culture, understands the norms, understands how to do things. And we pick those things up just being around people, right? We also pick those things up being next to people. But guess what? We're not all next to each other anymore, right? We're doing this thing where we're on video. And then we go about our day and do our stuff, and then we get back on for another meeting. And so things that went unspoken, that were learnable and absorbed just in the day-to-day, are not anymore. So leadership today requires greater intentionality around even solidifying some of those norms. Add to that, what Debbie experienced was with that explosive growth is you have people leading other people and not the leader or the follower have been at the organization long enough to even know what the norms are, right? And so it sort of compounds all that. So yeah, so why it does seem, I agree, it can sound very basic and like rudimentary. There is a lot of what I would actually consider magic that happens in an organization with a commitment to some of these best practices that really matter. They then allow you to innovate and take things to the level that you want. So,
but I think
So-
like the biggest thing there is it forced transparency on my part, and it forced delegation on my part. I'm still not the best delegator because I ran the organization by myself for so long. There's this part of it really did turn into my baby. I know what entrepreneurs feel like when they start transitioning from this solo entrepreneur to leader role, and how difficult it is to let certain things go. But putting systems into place where I was on multiple parts of this racy thing, and I was on multiple parts of this responsibility chart, and I had to tell everyone everything that I was doing. And when I fell behind, I could hide everything well. No one knew enough about the organization for me to, own any of my failures. But then once we started putting all these systems into place and we started putting all these processes into place, I had to start owning areas of the organization that had been running very inefficiently, and we had to address. And that was a lot of failure for me to have to swallow over the past 9 months. Yep, I did that wrong. Yeah, sorry you're having to fix that. Oh yeah, I did that wrong too. Okay. And so there's so many things that were just hidden for so long because it was me. I could fix it. It's fine. Move on. But now that I have these people that are now accountable for that task that, I kind of messed up and you have to fix now. We had to have these systems in place to be able to have these conversations. And so it led to discovery of the organization on what we were good at and what we weren't good at faster. It led to deeper connections made with my leadership team, because one of my leadership team members didn't even live in the state until 4.5 months, almost 6 months into the job, because she was transitioning here and she couldn't find a house to buy. And so we have all of these nuances, and some of the staff went from being my friends to being my employees. And then that's a whole nother level of, I have to own some things that are really uncomfortable to own right now, or I have to change this norm. But if I don't have a system in place to be able to catch that norm needs to be changed, so many of these emotions and aspects of these relationships would have gone unchecked, and then they would have caused a bigger issue down the line. So learning to systematize, learning how to talk to my staff, learning how to run meetings, learning how to build out charts, and things like that was crucial to be able to lead to hard conversations with my team.
So, I feel like if you're just tuning in, this is like coming back from a commercial break or something. Like, here you have visionary, transformative leader Debbie, and I don't know how else to describe your leadership than that. And do you really believe that there's magic in this mundane? Why would you say it works? Why is it that important? What can you describe a couple maybe anecdotes of what it did for you as a leader to have some of these systems begin to be put in place?
You asked me 4 years ago if I thought there was magic in the mundane, I would have said no. My engineer husband drives me bonkers with how long it takes him to, go through a decision or the processes that he does, or that I load the dishwasher wrong or whatever. Now that I'm in this role where I am managing a large team, and I've seen the results of systems, and I've seen the results of norm setting, and I've seen the results of quarterly goal setting, annual goal setting, and 1, 5, 10-year plans with the board and things like that, I have started to realize it is really organizational changing. So very early on when we were starting, we adopted Asana as our project management tool. And very early on, one of the things that I was talking to staff about is like, you guys are killing me with your questions left and right. I know I'm the only one with the institutional knowledge right now, but my entire day is answering your questions and answering this email, and it's all over the place, and I'm missing things because I don't know where you're putting it. I just can't keep up with everything you're asking me right now. My director of ops and finance made a Debbie's questions project in Asana and made a process for how you submit a question. If I need more information, I put it to this box and I tell you what information I need in order to answer your question, and then I can move it through the process. And that project is still used now when we need it, but it's maybe only used twice a month, 3 times a month now. And it's for when they need me to sign something or when they just have a very specific question. So I'm not getting Slack messages, I'm not getting emails, I'm not getting texts, I'm not getting multiple Asana tasks. It's all flowing to one very easy spot. And with me getting ready to go on maternity leave again, it was very helpful in doing that ED offboard to have that thing there. And then we redid our loan process. And that was something I had to step away from because I'd been running the loan program for a while. There was things that I had done wrong in it, not knowing that we were out of compliance. And so that was one where once we started getting the systems into place and I knew that that team was responsible and accountable for it, I had to step back because that was the failure that hurt the most. Because that was one that affected our clients. So it's like, oh, I did that wrong. And okay. And so going in and having them redo the process, and it led to some hard conversations, and it's going to keep leading to some hard conversations. And what does it really mean to be a mission-based lender? But I remember early on when I was working with Jared, of like, oh, the board this, the board that, like, I just don't understand how they don't see my big vision. Because I agree, I'm a massive big thinker. So I think a little bit too far sometimes. And so the board and I were just not getting each other because I was 5 years ahead and they're like, we're just catching up from the money you just got. And then we finally put all these systems into place, and that even extended over to the board side too. And so now we're at a place where in board meetings, we're talking about what does it mean to really be inclusive? What does it mean with our metrics if we're actually considering serving underrepresented founders? Who is an underrepresented founder? What should our 10-year impact be? And we're having these deep, like beautiful, big thinking conversations now that are directly tied to our impact. But none of that could have happened if they didn't trust my staff to do all of their jobs, because we could show them that they're doing their jobs through the metrics that we set up, through the systems that we set up, through the conversations and the more sophisticated, mature nature that this organization has grown into. None of that would have happened without this foundation that we've really been setting over the past 9 months.
So this is very exciting to me because you articulate it so well, both of you. I'm going to lean into a couple things from having just gotten through the classwork in the strategic leadership PhD that resonate with me with what you're saying. One of the articles that we read had to do with how important it is to be mindful about certain things long enough to allow them to become mindless in order that we can put our brain power and our strategic apply the strategic thinking to higher strategically valuable requirements. And the more that you can make mindless about the routines and the roles and responsibilities and processes, it frees the organizational brain power to apply that mindfulness, the strategic thinking, into new things. And it's not until you've been able to routinize, the mindlessness things that you can even begin thinking about tomorrow, because you need to figure out how we're going to, do our monthly reconciliations and do our paychecks and get our taxes together and figure out benefits and all these sorts of things. And, so that's just a theme or a framing that I wanted to bring here and get Jared's input to. And then the other thing I'd really like to get your input to about, and feel free to take them in any order, is what is the secret sauce for entrepreneurship? Is it getting these systems in place first, or is it this intangible, more abstract, visionary part of it, that is required. Can you start entrepreneurship from either spot, or does one need to come first or second? I'll throw it to Jer first to get his reactions, and then see where Debbie might come in on either of those.
All right. Well, you'll probably have to remind me of them again, because I'll lose track as I'm talking of them. But the one comment I would make, sort of leading into that, Kai, just to be clear, we're throwing around words like processes and systems, and I'm a big picture thinker. I'm a visionary when I am in my organizations. I'm not a spreadsheet person. I don't come in, and I actually hate processes. I hate systems. I hate to follow them. That's my nature, right? And so, but I understand the importance of them, right? And so, even though we're throwing around those words, I just want to make it clear that some of these processes are as simple as like how we're going to talk to each other, right? Or how we're going to communicate. These aren't all, these complex things that you need some engineer to come in and set up, right? Or that are super monotonous or super boring. That there are also some, Debbie's used the word norms, right? We've talked about that. There are also just some norms in how you do things. So
but let's even break that communication down. You're saying, what are we going to communicate about over email? What's going to be in a Google Doc? What's going to be in the Teams chat, or the Asana card, or the Trello card, or the, that's what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's part of it, right? Like Debbie and I and her team, we had a conversation, I don't know, it's been a month ago, Debbie, where we kind of listed out the norms, right? What are the norms, right? What is the expectation, right? Because we're not face to face like we used to be. You don't get to pick it up from the person, at the desk next to you. What does it mean when you get an email? When should you be responding to that? What's the difference when you get an email from somebody versus a text, and what goes in what system? And, Debbie mentioned they use Asana, which is great. I'm sort of, for a lot of this stuff, I'm kind of, software agnostic, but there's a lot of off the shelf things that you can bring in to support this stuff that I think is really critical, because again, you don't have to think about it then, right? You click on the button to start your meeting and you follow through the process, right? You don't have to think about it, but it's hitting all the things that matter every time you get together, right? And it's forcing the conversations that need to be had. And to Debbie's point, it creates transparency. And the beautiful part about transparency is nothing is then hidden. And so it lessens the surprises, right? Because you don't just set a quarterly goal for somebody and get to the end of the quarter and go, oh, you didn't meet it, now we have this problem, right? You're looking at it every single week as a team, right? And you're moving this process along. So that's a little bit of insight on that. My take on your last question was, I think entrepreneurship can start from either side. I think most often you see it started, and I see it in my own experience, started from the visionary side, right? Because those people often have ideas, but that's not always the case. There are people that are very process oriented that have these amazing ideas, right? And what's most important is filling both of those roles in an organization, right? Gino Wickman wrote a book called Rocket Fuel, and it basically speaks to that idea of visionaries and integrators, right? And the best organizations have two, right? Have a visionary and an integrator. And they push each other, but both are needed. In smaller organizations, I think what you tend to see most is a small company organization being led by a visionary, right? And they don't like process. And I include myself in this, right? When I'm in that seat, like, I don't like process, I don't like systems, but you can't fulfill your full potential as an organization, as a business, as a leader, without those things at the core. That's my belief. So, and then what was the very first question? Sorry.
It wasn't a question, it was the framing of the mindfulness and mindlessness. And as you're not, right in your wheelhouse, it's just saying what you were saying already in a different way. But yeah, if you want to riff on that, go for it. Yeah.
I would say, 100%, right? Like, these structures, these processes, and like I said, I use those terms kind of loosely. And again, these aren't things that, I invented or my team invented, right? These are things that have been written about for years, right? In business books and rebranded and renamed and, evolved, but they're out there. Piecing those things together, and this is one of the other roles we play as an outsider is, you could just say, oh, go read this book, Debbie, and implement this system, right? You could do those things, but that can be difficult, right? How does it fit? Does every piece fit with us? What does that look like in our organization? What we like to come in and do is say, hey, understand your organization. Here's some things, right? And then evolve those things and tailor those things and build those processes to really suit the organization. And so, yeah, I think that movement that you talked about is a great way to talk about it, is kind of making some of this stuff mindless, right? So it just happens. And honestly, then it just does, right? In some organizations, it's hard to talk about an issue, right? Every single meeting, we spend the majority of our times talking about issues that the teams have listed out and submitted to the meeting beforehand, right? That becomes routine. Once you get a few months into that, nobody's like, oh, it's hard to talk about issues, because we do it every week, probably for at least an hour, right? Each team does. And so it becomes routine. So that's, I guess, a little riffing on that.
Thanks. Debbie, if you want to just add into this great interview the secret sauce to entrepreneurship and what to do first, that would be an extra bonus.
I would have so many more dollars if I had the answer to that question, because I don't. One of the biggest things that I have seen along the way with working with entrepreneurs is it's not a certain type of person. It's a certain type of mindset. And so the secret sauce that I have found, particularly with some of the most successful entrepreneurs, and I'm not talking success in just millions of dollars and great exits and things like that, but I'm talking about these people who I look up to as entrepreneurs, are the ones who have a fail forward mentality. We're going to mess up. We're going to get it wrong. We're going to get it wrong a lot. But how often are we willing to go back and figure out why it was wrong? And so some of the most successful entrepreneurs that I know who are the most innovative are the ones who listen and ask the most questions. And so when we come across these entrepreneurs who are willing to say, I really don't know about this area. I know I want to improve my organization, or that I want to improve my business, but I just don't know what I'm doing here. It's that coachability aspect that I really see as a huge benefit of the entrepreneurs that do make it far. They're tenacious, they fail forward, they ask a lot of questions, they're willing to say, I don't know. And that's who I've gotten to model after for this whole past year. My approach to the board before working with Jair was this relationship of, they're my boss, I need to be in this, like, I always need to be perfect, I never need to tell them when something's going wrong, and and it was this very guarded position to be in. And now to be able to go to them and say, like, hey, here's what I've learned as a leader this year, here's some areas that are still some blind spots for me that I need to be working on. One of my staffers today called me out on some of the things. I will read an article and I'll get to my answer, and then I won't keep reading the rest of the article to find out if there's more context around said answer. I'll just go implement the answer. And then I realized that I didn't read the whole thing. And so there's certain things where I make too quick decisions sometimes. And so there's some areas of improvement there too, but I can hear that from my team now and not feel like it's an affront to me. So there's been this, not only has there been this leadership development, there's been mental health work. And so some of the best entrepreneurs also understand that their businesses and their work is not their worth. And so when we can get to the point, not only as entrepreneurs and as leaders, but as humans, and realize that our worth is stagnant. It doesn't get better because we do a good job or get worse because we do something wrong. And detach that from our work product. It's so much easier to say, I am proud of my work product, but I know that there's things that I can still fix. And so that, I think, has been the biggest thing, particularly for me in going through this process, is seeing my staff also start to come to terms with that. when I first started giving feedback, I'm direct. I own a lot of things. I can sometimes be a little sharp. And so going through and saying feedback is direct but not personal, it's really hard for us to get through that for a while there. And then I've started to see them come back with their own problems that they're seeing in themselves and other things that they can own up to. And we're starting to see just more vulnerability and more trust in each other because we've set this foundation in place. Like, one of our norms are when we're having conversations, it's people first. So yeah, we need to remember that there may be other things going on in this person's life that we need to take into consideration. It doesn't mean we coddle. It doesn't mean we release them of responsibility. But it does mean that there can be more grace given, more compassion given when we're having some of these conversations. And so that molding of not only mental health support, but also from my counselor, and then also support on the leadership side from Jair and his team, and then a leadership team that where we have the norm set of we care deeply about each other. We're going to put each other as people first, has really helped us with getting through some of the hardest conversations that we've had to have as a team over the past year.
All right. I'm going to add, I can't help myself, one more, org theory frame to this, and then we'll transition to our shameless plugs and our listener thank you gifts and that sort of thing. There's one organizational theory that really resonates with me and connects some of these things. And Mary Ulbein and some others have championed complexity leadership theory. And in this particular theory, they talk about 3 leader roles. They talk about the entrepreneurial leader, has the new ideas, and think about this as not like starting a new business, but working within an organization and saying, hey, our organization should do this thing differently. We should add a new product, a new service. We should hit this market. We should, get into TikTok advertising or whatever. So something just new, right? That's the entrepreneurial leader. You have the operational leaders, and what they've been trying to do is keep all these systems running and keep all their protocols in place and, exploit what's working well, exploit with a positive connotation, right? Not explore and do all this new stuff out here. And what she talks about is, or Mary Ulbein in this theory, is you need a third type of leadership. You need an enabling leader or enabling leadership that convenes something she describes as adaptive space. And the adaptive space is where these natural tensions can be resolved constructively and not destroy the organization and then create all this stress and that sort of thing. So that was really helpful. The one thing that I think is so useful is what the theory suggests is, how do you get new ideas to integrate into systems that are meant to be rigid so they work? Is you need to get operational leaders to sponsor and champion and almost act as a Sherpa to the person with the new idea to kind of guide them into how can this new idea be fit? How can we navigate this thinking, the essence of what you're after with the new idea, into the systems and structures that are already in place so that they're not totally disruptive and can be implemented. So that's complexity leadership theory. You can read more about it. But Jair, any thoughts on that, that type of framework? I guess the question is, where is your adaptive space? How does that enabling leadership show up?
Yeah. So, I actually think some of that does get created with some basic systems, right? By the way things are structured, it's sort of built into some of these best practices, which can be really valuable. I'm also a big proponent, and Debbie is as well, of sort of self and team understanding. And there's a lot of good tools out there, right? Debbie and her team had been into doing a lot in Strengths Finders, which I've worked with in the past. And I use a tool I like to use with all my clients called the Predictive Index. which allows you to understand who you are, but also who your teammates are. But what I love about the predictive index is they take it a step further. They do a lot of different things, but one of the things they do is they take it a step further, and they have a tool that allows you to map your teams and overlay that with the goals of the teams and see where you have alignment and strengths and who fits and who fills those different roles as we're trying to work towards a specific goal or objective. So the type of team you are and the type of objectives or things you're going after. And so for me, I'm a big believer that if you can put those things out in the open, you can see the value, right? Oftentimes when you really map out a team, you see, oh, this team is all these people that sit in this one quadrant, right? There may be the entrepreneurial leaders and they have one operational leader, and everyone thinks the operational leader is the stick in the mud, right? Pushing back on everything, right? Actually, that person is really important to the organization. And the fact that they feel like a stick in the mud is probably because that team is not that well balanced, right? And so being able to map that and really understand that, I find just that alone sort of creates more of that space, because it changes people's mindset. It changes how people value their teammates and what they see in their teammates, and allows sort of that gap to be spanned, and it can help you find the right person, right? Hey, we're having this issue. We have this new idea, and we have operations. Well, we have other people that sit in this different quadrant, right? And that are naturally more collaborative. We can ask one of them to lead this project, right? To help bring those two sides together. So yeah, I think that theory is really important. I think understanding it is important. But the more you can dive into it and really get a grasp on it through some self-discovery, through team discovery, only helps you be more successful.
That's great. Debbie, anything you'd like to add before we move into our shameless plugs, which I will model first, and then listener thank you gifts, and then just an open-ended opportunity for you each to share other resources for people that want to learn more. Anything else you'd like to say, Debbie, to wrap the core part of the conversation here?
A really quick tangent on that theory. I'm part of the Virginia Rural Leader Institute, and one of the tools they used was the KAI assessment. And the KAI assessment looks at innovation versus adaptability.
That's not the Kai assessment.
Well, I mean, it's the Kai.
It's not my assessment, right?
But it's not yours. But yeah, it's innovator versus adaptability, and how you need both of those. And when we were doing this assessment, they put you on like a dot chart. You have a number and whatever. It's a scale from 30 to 160. 160 is innovation side, 30 is on the adaptability side. Adaptability people like to maintain systems and improve systems and create efficiencies. Innovators like to break systems and build new ones. So there's one of my really great partners in the region, and she's also in the Virginia Rural Leader Institute with me. And when they put up the chart, there was two outliers. One person was at a 55, and there's another person at a 145. And so then the next step was to put everyone in groups of people that were close to their number. And this 55 person was in a group by themselves, and this 145 person was in a group by themselves. And everyone thought this one person was the 145. Turns out I was that 145, and I'm way far on the I love breaking systems, which is why my engineer husband is driven nuts by me often. Whereas my partner in the region was the adaptability side, and she's really good at maintaining these systems and creating efficiencies. And her and I worked so well together, and we never understood why we worked so well together. But it's because first we approached each other as humans. And then we realized, like, I could break and build new systems, and then she could take that and like really turn it into something amazing. And then when it stopped working, she could bring it back to me and say, hey, something's not working about this. Will you take it and break it again and figure out what we need to do next? And so now we have this understanding of each other when we're in meetings of, oh, is it time for us to like improve this system, or is it time for us to break it? And so I took that same type of learning back to my staff. I have two on my staff who are very much so about maintaining, improving, making it look better. And I have there's 5 on our leadership team, and I have 3 on our leadership team who lean more on the innovator side, and I have 2 on the adaptability side. And we've started to understand each other a lot more when it comes to, oh, this is why. If the system's not working, someone needs to say something, because it either means we need to create an efficiency in it, or we just need to dump it all together and start over. And so it's created better conversation. So I love that theory. It explains a lot of what I've been learning around breaking and why I do innovative visionary roles. But yes, to all of that.
Well, I'll put some links to Dr. Ulbin's work, and this has been such a rich conversation. We'll switch to shameless plugs here and listener thank you gifts and other resources that you want to share. So shameless plug on behalf of the JMU School of Professional and Continuing Education would be 2 new programs that we're launching. One is with Maureen Metcalf, who's the CEO and founder of the Innovative Leadership Institute. And we are partnering to offer a 4-month leader development program. So you as an individual could join and work on self-awareness. And the whole thing here, she was the first guest in the speaker series, is about how do you innovate your own leadership? How do you think about that? So if that's interesting to anybody watching here, follow the link. The registration deadlines are in October 2022. But if you click on those same links to see after that, to see what the next cohorts are, check it out. There's a payment plan. It's accessible, or hopefully as accessible as possible to cover the cost of the program. Secondly, we are also launching for the first time an open enrollment version of a new course called Foundations of Project Management and Team Communication. And this is a way to learn, how does a flow chart work? How does an RACI chart work? I think conversations about those things can create this adaptive space. So it's co-taught with my colleague, Thea Litchfield Campbell, and myself. It's all online and affordable price. And it's called Foundations of Project Management and Team Communication. It's for the people that are looking, where do you start? And don't need to go get a Project Management Institute, PMP or CAPM prep, which we also have, but isn't for everybody. So we'll put those links in there as well. It starts at the end of October. So what shameless plugs would Debbie offer, and then Jer?
A shameless plug for us is if you want to link up with other entrepreneurs, we do an entrepreneur off the clock every month, because it's a funny spin on, we know that entrepreneurs are never off the clock. So on Wednesday, October 19th, we meet up in 3 different spots. So whatever's closest to you. We meet at Heliotrope Brewery in Lexington. We meet at Winchester Brewworks in Winchester, and we meet at Pale Fire Brewery in Harrisonburg. So if you want to meet up with some other entrepreneurs, you can definitely come and find them there at 5 o'clock. Come and grab a beer with us, hang out. And then if you want to just learn about the entrepreneurial mindset and what it looks like to get a business off the ground, we have a startup weekend coming up in November. It will be at the Stanton Innovation Hub. That's the weekend of Friday, November 11th. So you can find all that information at our website on the event tab.
Awesome. Thank you for all those resources. Jer, any shameless plugs or listener thank you gifts?
Okay, well, I'll rattle through all of them. So shameless plug would be, if you are a leader of an organization, whether it's a nonprofit or business, and you're scaling, and anything in Debbie's story resonated, at MSL, we love to come in and partner with people and organizations and support them on this journey. And like I said, we do it in the fractional capacities from different perspectives, but depending on the need of the organization. We'd love to chat with you. So that'd be one thing. Sort of thank you gift would be happy to do an evaluation with anyone that wants to reach out and chat through where their organization is at, what's what they're struggling with as they're trying to scale, and provide them with a little feedback on areas that we think would be valuable to them. That would be a listener gift. And
the way to access that would be the form on your website.
Or just I can give my email if that's easier for folks.
Sure, say it, and then I'll also put
Yep.
the link to the website in the comments.
Yeah, my email is just Jair, Jair @mslconsulting.com, but consulting does not have any vowels. So it's always a fun exercise to type
That's
it.
why I'll put the link in the.
For sure, for sure. And then the last thing I would offer is, as we've talked about some of these best practices, I would say there's a handful of books that I consider sort of foundational to this. So if people are looking or wondering what some of these things might look like, I always tell people, start with Gino Wickman, Traction, right? A phenomenal book. There's a lot of that was or foundational stuff for that book that was done by, I would say, Vern Harnish. He had a book called Scaling Up and Rockefeller Habits, which were sort of earlier. They're not connected, but I think they overlap in some of the things they're sort of teaching. And then The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni, and then Lean Startup by Eric Ries. Those are kind of like, if I could only have a couple books to recommend to people, I would pretty much always recommend that someone that's building or leading an organization. Those would be the ones I would recommend. So,
well, if you sign up for the email list for the speaker series, you'll get all those recommendations and the links that I'll look up for those. Debbie, anything you want to offer in terms of last words for this interview, ways to connect with you, SCCF, or other resources?
Yeah, I would say if you're looking to get involved as an entrepreneur, looking at what our services are, things like that, you're going to want to link up with Ryan Hall on our team. And so he's Ryan at SCCFVA.org. And then if you're looking to mentor or get involved in one of our programs or learn more about our startup weekends or entrepreneurship summit, that's Katie Overfield Zook. And that's Katie at SCCFVA.org. I won't be here for the next 3 months. So if you really want to know more about my journey, you can hit me up after the first year.
Sounds good. I can't thank both of you enough. This was just packed with value, I think, and ways for people to learn more moving forward in lots of different directions. I want to thank you both for your commitment to the organizations that you're both a part of, that you're supporting, because it takes everybody working together to even support one organization, much less entrepreneurship on the scale of regional ecosystems. So appreciate it, and I hope people found value. If you did, share the interview, promote the speaker series to others, and stay connected. Thank you.